Cookery Grade 10, Quarter 4, Preparing and Cooking Meat. Our topic is Methods of Cooking Meat. The following are the methods of cooking meat. Choosing the right cooking technique. Using the appropriate cooking method for the type of food being prepared is a major part of the culinary arts. Tough cuts of meat like beef brisket or lamb shank need to be cooked slowly at low heat for a long time and with plenty of moisture. Prepared properly, these cuts can be incredibly tender and delicious. On the other hand, dry heat methods typically involve very high temperatures and short cooking times. A piece of brisket cooked in this way on a grill, let's say, would be tough, chewy, and largely edible. Interestingly enough, a beef tenderloin steak cooks using slow, moist. There are two methods of cooking meat. The dry heat cooking, such as roasting, broiling, or sautéing, and the moist heat cooking, like braising, steaming, or poaching. Dry heat cooking. Dry heat cooking refers to any cooking technique where the heat is transferred to the food item without using any moisture. Dry heat cooking typically involves high heat with temperatures of 400 Fahrenheit or hotter. Baking or roasting in an oven is a dry heat method because it uses hot air to conduct the heat. Pan-searing steak is considered dry heat cooking because the heat transfer takes place through the hot metal of the fan. Note, the browning of food, including the process by which meat is browned called Maillard reaction, can only be achieved through dry heat method. The dry heat methods includes number 1, roasting and baking. Forms of dry heat cooking that use hot, dry air to cook food, roasting and baking. Like other dry heat cooking methods, roasting and baking brown the surface of the food, which in turn develops complex flavors and aromas. Both words describe a method of cooking an item by enveloping it in hot, dry air, generally inside an oven, at temperatures at least 300 Fahrenheit and often much hotter. A convection oven which circulates hot air throughout the oven can enhance the browning reaction. Number 2 is the grilling and broiling. Dry heat cooking methods that rely on heat being conducted through the air from an open flame are grilling and broiling. This type of cooking procedures browning reaction on the surface of the food, thus encouraging the development of complex flavors and aromas. Grilling cooks hot and fast because air is poor and conductor of heat. Broiling and grilling require the food to be quite close to the heat source, which is, in this case, is likely to be an open flame. Number 3 is the sautéing and pan frying. Sautéing is a form of dry heat cooking that uses a very hot pan and a small amount of fat to cook the food very quickly. Like other dry heat cooking methods, sautéing browns the food surface as it cooks and develops complex flavors and aromas. Sautéing requires a very hot pan. When sautéing, it is important to heat the pan for a minute, then add a small amount of fat and let it get hot as well before adding the food to the pan. This hot fat helps brown the surface of the food. Another key is to avoid overloading or overcrowding the pan. Number 4 is the deep frying. Since deep frying involves submerging food in hot liquid fat, it might take some time to get used to the idea that it's actually a form of dry heat cooking. But if you've ever seen the violent reaction of hot oil to even a tiny drop of water, You know that oil and water are a couple of opposites that nothing to do with each other. The next method is the moist heat cooking. Moist heat cooking methods include any technique that involves cooking with moisture, whether it's steam, water, stock, wine, or some other liquid. Cooking temperatures are much lower, anywhere from 140 Fahrenheit to a maximum of 212 Fahrenheit, because water doesn't get any hotter than that. Moist heat cooking includes, number 1, simmering. With simmering, the cooking liquid is a bit hotter than poaching, from 180 Fahrenheit to 205 Fahrenheit. Here, we will see bubbles forming and gently rising to the surface of the water. But the water still isn't a full rolling boil, because it surrounds the food in water and maintains a more or less constant temperature. Simmering cooks food very evenly. It's an excellent choice for many culinary preparation, including stocks or soups, starchy items such as potatoes or pasta, and many others. Another moist heat cooking method is the boiling. The hottest of these three stages is boiling, where the water reaches its highest possible temperature of 212 Fahrenheit. It's actually the least likely of the three to be used for cooking. That's because the violent agitation caused by rolling boil can be too rough on food and will often damage it. Water at full boil would be a bad choice for cooking an egg outside its shell, as we do when preparing poached egg, because the agitation could cause the egg to fall apart. The same holds true to delicate fish as well as some pastas. Steaming. Steaming is a moist heat cooking technique that employs hot steam to conduct the heat to the food item. Cooking with steam. Steaming can be done on a stove top with a pot containing a small amount of liquid that is brought to a simmer. The item to be cooked is then placed in the basket suspended above the liquid and the pot covered. Number 4 is braising and stewing. Braising is a form of moist heat cooking in which the item to be cooked is partially covered with liquid and then simmered slowly at low temperature. Though it can be done on the stove top, braising is best done in the oven, because the heat fully surrounds the pot and causes the food to cook more evenly than it is where only heated from below. Moist heat cooking begins by searing, because moist heat does not permit the various browning reaction that dry heat produces, giving cooked meats the brown outer crust that also helps to develop complex flavors and aromas. It's customary to sear meat in a pan with a small amount of hot fat before braising it. This step helps to develop flavors as well as making the meat more appealing visually. Read more about how to braise meat. How braising works. Braising is a good choice of cooking method for cuts of meat that are tougher or older animals. The connective tissues that are more prevalent in cuts like this, which can make meat tough and chewy when improperly cooked, are slowly dissolved through a long, slow application of moist heat. So you end up with a tender piece of meat. The following are the factors affecting the choice of cooking methods in meat. The following factors that affect the choice of cooking methods in meat is the cut of meats. Tender cuts like ribs and loin cuts are used for roasting, broiling, and grilling. Less tender cuts from leg or round are used for braising. Tougher cuts from shank or shoulder are usually braised. Least tender cuts from shanks, breast, brisket, and flank are cooked by moist heat. Ground meat and cube, usually made from trimmings, can be cooked by dry heat or moist heat. Next is the fat content. Meats high in fat are cooked without added fat, such as roasting or broiling. Meats low in fat are often cooked with added fat to prevent dryness, like sautéing, pan-frying, or braising. And number 3, the desired quality. Tenderness is not the only goal of cooking. To develop flavor and appearance is also one of the objectives to get the desired quality. A time to remember. This is Maylene Huliganga. Thank you for watching.